I won't bother getting into makes of pianos. In the US there used to be over 300 builders, and in Canada there was over 30. So there's lots and lots and lots and lots of builders. But if you do some Googling, you can find what some reputable makes are. So another thing you want to look for in keys is how much wiggle there is side to side. These have some wear, but not too bad. See, the key is like a teeter-totter. There's a pin more or less at the balance point, roughly at the middle of the key, or at least I won't get into the geometry of it, but there's a point where the key swivels like a teeter-totter, and there's a pin that comes up through a mortise, through a hole in the key, and on either side of that pin is a little felt bushing. Same thing at the front, except you can't actually see that. It all comes up from underneath. So those felt bushings, when they get worn, your key will have a lot of play side to side. In bad cases, you'll even get some knocking. So the side-to-side play is one thing, but one thing in a way that's even worse is if you have what are called pulley keys, where you can actually pull the key in and out. That indicates that the hole that the key pivots on is elongated. It's no longer round, it's more of an oval from front to back. So that makes for a very sloppy action. And in a bad case, no amount of regulating is really going to make that feel nice and solid, because there is that slop, and you'll get a fair bit of noise too when you play staccato. When the key comes back up, it can bounce around a fair bit, producing rather extra noise. Now, most any piano, they're going to have a front piano, a front panel. Now, if you get down and look underneath the keyboard, keybed, you will see, usually in the middle or perhaps on either end, there's a little spring clip. You push that in while you're holding on to the panel. There should be at least enough room to get your hand in there, your fingers. Otherwise it's very difficult to get off. So you lift up the clip and just pull it forward. Bring it toward your way until you can lift it out. Once again, ask the owner for permission to do this. Be very careful when you take it off, they don't go and mar the finish. And then you notice that there's some holes there and some pegs here where that panel will fit into place again. So make sure you remember which is the front and which is the back when you do this. I'll just put that over there for now. Now here's where you can get into some real meat. So this is the soundboard of the piano. A lot of people mistake this cast iron plate for the soundboard, but it's not. This plate takes most of the strain of the strings. This piano is under many tons of tension. And this is the soundboard here. It's like the back and top of a guitar or a violin. It's a large diaphragm of wood that vibrates. So when the string vibrates, it causes that soundboard to vibrate, and the soundboard moves a lot of air. So all things being equal, the bigger the soundboard, the more sound you'll get out of it, the more volume. If you just had a string that was vibrating in the air and not attached to anything that would resonate, it would produce very little sound. So when you attach the string to something that does vibrate, then that's what amplifies the tone of the string. So in addition to the bridge, we have the soundboard, we have the bridge right here, and also here, and this curves way up into the treble section of the piano. We can see here that the strings get shorter and shorter as they go up, and in the bass they get longer and longer. Now, what you want to look at here is right up at the top of those pins. You want to look for cracks, because as you can see, the string has some side bearing. It has to take a little angle across, so that's very much of a weak point. The tension on that string will tend to push that pin, which can cause a crack, hairline crack. And if those cracks are really bad, then that's going to interfere with the sound, because you're not going to have a solid termination anymore, and a lot of sound energy gets lost. Sound energy that should be going straight into the bridge, into the soundboard, will just sort of dissipate into the air, and you're not going to get a very good tone. Also be very difficult to tune, so it's stable, and basically the tone will be poor. Same thing applies here. The whole area of the piano can be subject to splitting like that. You can also look at the soundboard, see if there's any noticeable splits. In this instance, I don't see any. Also, just as an aside, look at how tight the growth rings are in this piano. It's not that often nowadays that you would see a new piano where the growth rings are that tight. Some rebuilders say it doesn't really matter how many growth rings there are per inch. I'm not sure about that because I'm not really a rebuilder, but I do like to see big growth rings, or tight growth rings myself. And another critical area as far as cracks really is up in the treble area here. Sometimes those are very badly cracked in the last octave or more, and that will produce a very poor tone and very bad tuning. You'll get a lot of, you can isolate a given string and hear what's called a false beat. Just give me a moment here. I'll see if I can show you what I mean. This is kind of an impromptu talk, so I'm not quite as ready as I could be. Alright, so now I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a very faint kind of a wavering, shivering, fluttering sound. That's what we call a false beat. That's one string that's doing that. So it's typical to find that on a piano anyway, but if it's really, really pronounced, see, listen to the difference. That's a different string. That false beat is much faster than that false beat. It's almost double the speed. So things like that make it problematical to tune the piano. As I say, you'll find them on most any piano anyway. It's really part of the tone. I only ever tuned one piano that didn't have any false beats, and actually it was a very boring piano in terms of the tone. It was just very dry, and it seemed to, the sound faded very quickly. But if you have really, really bad false beats as a result of cracked bridges, then it's going to be very unruly, difficult to tune, and just generally poor sound. Now, another thing you want to look at in the action is the dampers. How well are they doing the job of stopping the string from vibrating? You see these little pads rest in the strings, so when you depress the key, the damper moves away and allows the strings to vibrate. And then when you let up in the key, the damper goes back in the string and stops the sound from vibrating. So if the dampers aren't doing their job, you'll hear something almost like that, where the tone will ring. So you want to look for that, and if you hear a kind of a sort of a buzzing sound when the damper lands in the string, that might indicate that it has a crust because of atmospheric conditions. Sometimes you can get rid of that by maybe scraping the face of the damper, but oftentimes you would actually need to replace the damper. If you do have dampers that are buzzing like that, you may very well find rust and verdigris and other things throughout the action anyway. Now that's another thing too, when you're looking at the tuning pins and the strings, watch for rust. That's always a troublesome point. A very little bit of rust is not necessarily a huge problem, but if there's a lot of rust, that's not a good sign of average atmospheric conditions in the piano. It could mean also loose glue joints and rust in other metal components and rust on the springs in the action. So that could be a bad scene. You might want to think twice about buying any kind of piano like that. So on and on it goes. So now we've talked about the plate, the strings and soundboard, the hammers a little bit, keys, cracks in the bridge and soundboard. So as far as this particular piano goes, that's probably not too bad of a basic rundown right now. It kind of covers the basics anyway. So we'll leave it at that for this session, and we'll talk to you later.